How do you think about prioritizing your investment in human resources versus other aspects of the business? Making sure that you have the talent on the team that you want to get the things done you need for the business.
I'm a firm believer in that you hire where you want to go, not where you're at. A lot of folks make the mistake of they're just hiring what they can afford at the time, but not where they want to go. What happens is you don't accelerate as fast as you could. And if you are growing, you get put in situations where you don't have the experience. So it's really important to hire forward. Don't hire where you're at.
So does that require like a good understanding of these are the things that I know I'm going to need, and so I'm going to kind of hire for that versus I'm not sure what I might need and I got to plan for that unknown?
So I look at this in a few ways. Sometimes you meet someone and you know that they'll be a good fit without a defined role.
Oh.
And then sometimes you need a role and you're seeking that person and you happen to find that person, or you're really trying to put an effort to find that person. Like I'll say when we first started, hired Alex in shipping. Well, she had a really good attitude and she had this willingness to learn. I mean, this is like 4 people in the company. We're getting a bunch of e-commerce orders and we're like, okay, we need someone to jump in and do this. For her skill set, it was like a fantastic opportunity because she has now steady work. She's used to working kind of restaurant gigs and things like that. And she had this willingness. So she didn't necessarily have the knowledge, but it wasn't that hard to figure out. And we didn't even really have the knowledge.
Right.
So we all figured it out together. So that would be an example. You find the person and all of a sudden the roles kind of get created. Same with our VP of operations now, Connor, who's been a fantastic add to our team. I knew we needed someone with really strong business acumen, like an MBA type person, for lack of better words, that really had this fiscal discipline and looked at stuff in a quantitative way. And MBA from Duke, just a very well pedigreed person. I didn't know exactly where I was going to put him, but very quickly it flushed itself out.
Yeah.
Conversely, my head of sales, Matt, I definitely knew what role I needed. I needed someone that understood retail. That was a gap that I could not figure out in time. I needed to bring on that expertise. And it's not like I couldn't figure out the mechanics behind retail. It's the relationships. It's the understanding the nuances. Like he's forgot more than I learned the first year, honestly. Like
Right.
there's so many little things that happen in the course of a business, and him having many years at Anheuser-Busch and other companies, like I knew I needed that expertise. At the time, even if we couldn't afford him, it was really important that we were hiring forward to where we wanted to go, and I knew he could help take us there.
Obviously, you knew that sales was going to be an important part of this business, but you didn't wait to start the business until you had a mat. I get what you're saying in terms of the right hire is going to accelerate what you can do even before you know what all your needs are. But how do you figure that out as an early stage entrepreneur?
If I was not able to sell online, there's no way I would have started this business because I knew my zone of genius, so to speak, was in e-commerce, was in online marketing. And that also gave us the opportunity to find product market fit, meaning we could launch a beer, we can see how customers react to it, and we could double down on that and not make as much as the other stuff. And that's exactly what happened. So we were able to do that. And by the time we built momentum over the year, we got some distribution stuff in the pipeline without our head of sales. Then he came in and he knew the 2 best wholesalers in Chicago. And that's kind of how it started. But I would look at it as, is there an opportunity for you to have revenue and not be dependent on someone, or find a co-founder and lean into that co-founder's expertise? So if I had not had the opportunity to sell online and I really wanted to start this business, I would have found a co-founder that knew retail and I would bring him in as an equity partner day one because I knew that was the only way to make revenue in an organization.
Right.
And with this, when you make a product, especially like beer, there's a shelf life on it. So you can't just make it and it just sit around forever and you're like, oh yeah, I hope to sell it. No, it's the clock is ticking as soon as it's brewed.
Yeah.
Like hoppy beer, you should have within 30 days. So look at your old beer if there's any lesson you take from this and throw it out because it's not going to be good if it's hoppy.
What's your advice to somebody who has started their business and now realizes they have a pretty big gap that they need to fill in terms of the team to go, I need to bring somebody in that's going to have a stake in this with us versus subcontract to a company, or something like that?
Well, that's exactly what I did, and I've done it a few different ways. I have had co-founders that from day one they're co-founders, and we split the business accordingly. And that's almost more dangerous because you're if it's someone new that you haven't worked with, you start to see work ethic, and you can start to build animosity. If it's a 50-50 split, let's say, and the one person's put in way more work and the other person's like on vacation and doing dumb shit, but they think they're entitled to the 50%, which happens all the time.
Yeah.
It's almost more dangerous to do that, especially if the person doesn't have like a skill set.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean they can't be great at like certain things, but if you don't have like a precise skill, like, you've been in retail for 20 years, or you know how to brew, or, whatever, you name it, then it's really hard to kind of justify that. What I would say is if you have to bring someone in, you just have to really look at that person and say, okay, do I want to be partners with this person? Like, as a partner in the business, who cares if you started day one or not? Like, to me, I look at him as if he did. And really
Yeah.
any of the key employees that we brought on, I look as if, if they're partners in the business, like, I'll look at them as if they were here day one anyway. Like,
Right.
I'd consider them part of the founding team, because in the grand scheme of time, like, it really doesn't matter so much. So my advice would be start to build a business. If you identify gaps and you can't necessarily afford to pay that person market, you need to convince them the value. And you got to look at it like stock, right? Let's say your valuation is $1 million today, and they come on. Well, they're coming on $1 million valuation, but maybe in 2 years, you're like, we're going to do $10 million. Well, that person should look at it as like, I can get a 10x return from any equity I get,
Yeah.
versus like, what percentage do I own? And people get
Right.
caught up in that a lot. Yeah, that's important because that's how much stock you're going to get. But the reality is, like, if you can get that upside and start early, it's a win-win.
Yeah. Well, that's a great way to think about that in terms of the return on your investment as a portion of the.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a risk, right? It's like a risk on both sides, because you're basically getting a partner in the business. But there's things you can do to protect that. And any standard agreement that an attorney would write would have what's called vesting in there. So there'd be a vesting schedule. And what that means is that equity is earned over time.
Hmm.
So a typical vesting schedule is 4 years. So you would get 25% per year vested. You could also have, I don't want to get it too far in the weeds, but you can also have what's called a cliff, to say like, okay, well, maybe I don't know, maybe after 1 year, it's just not enough time to see if, like, this person gets equity, he has equity now. You can't really get rid of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can do a cliff to say, like, we're going to do a 2 year cliff. So yes, you earn that equity, but you don't actually get it for 2 years. So for example, if you do a 4 year vesting schedule with a 2 year cliff, at 2 years, you get 50% of it. But at 1 year and 10 months, if you part ways, you get zero. So like, there's ways to protect yourself, and those are very standard clauses. So it de-risks the founder.
Mm-hmm.
If you just give someone equity right away, how do you know that they're going
Right.
to be a good employer partner and
Yeah.
not crazy? Like, there's all these different factors, especially if you don't know the person.
Yeah.
You have history with them and you know them, like, it's completely different.
Do you find that when somebody is a partner in the business, that also kind of helps align work ethic? And I want to tie this back to what you said in terms of, we didn't have a role for this person, but they had the right something, right?
Mhm.
Attitude or whatever, that there's something that's kind of revealed, like, oh, like, the harder I work, the more I'm going to get out of this, not just I'm going to get a raise or I'm going to get a promotion in a title bump or something like that. But I don't know, is there something there in terms of like the way everyone's working together when at a partner level that is really accelerating the business the way you talked about earlier?
I think so. In some ways, it's part of a compensation plan. So maybe some of those folks don't feel as much of a partner as I think they should feel. And it depends how much equity you have or how much stake you have, right? If, like, I would say any equity is great, but let's go to like the public company for a second here. So you get they call it like LTIP, or long-term incentive plan, when you work for a public company, you're on the executive team. So I would get that when I was an executive at Cars and when I sold my businesses to Cars. And that was a really good incentive to stay on, but it didn't make me feel like more connected to the company. It was more monetary.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like, oh, well, I'm in this, like, this is my team here. And it's not a bad thing. It's just like the company is so big and so much is out of your control that It's more like of a compensation thing. So I think sometimes in small companies you could get caught up in that, and it feels like maybe it's just like a part of a comp plan. But here, I really want people to feel like, you know, they're partners because they are. Like, I don't dictate a lot of things. I mean, I'll drive them toward a direction like we talked about in previous podcasts if I'm like, or we'll debate, but like at the end of the day, I'm like, you're responsible for revenue, dude. Like, the bank doesn't care why you didn't pay them. At the end of the day, we need outcomes. So,
Yeah.
you know, there's stuff we'll debate on. And I'm like, if we can unlock this, it's going to unlock more value for our company. And it might be unorthodox.
Yeah.
Like, it might be, our go to market might be so unorthodox that you've never even heard of it. And you're 20 years in the business, you've never experienced it. And I have to like fight for that because on one end, someone might be like, well, you don't know what you're talking about because you weren't in the space. On another end, I like to disrupt thinking.
Yeah.
And I think that's where value is unlocked. And that's what I did in the automotive space. Everyone said the same thing to me. And then all of a sudden, you know, I sold it for a couple $100 million because I kept going at this thinking. And then after a while, people started to be like, holy shit, what are you guys doing? I'm like, I'm doing the same thing I did. I just was like persistent. And all of a sudden, I'm unlocking these tools and this technology that really had been in existence, but I just made it way better and added things to it. And that's really what unlocks value. So you have to, as the CEO, you have to know your long-term play, and you have to then kind of sell to your team, like, here's why I think we should make this decision.
Right.
And luckily, I have an awesome team that understands that. Like, they're not like, oh, well, this is the way it's always been done, and this is the way we have to do it. If I was in that space and I had that team, I couldn't survive. I'd be like, all right, this isn't going to work because I know then we'd end up just like every other company in our industry, per se, the same valuation, the same everything. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm just not interested in that.
It's a good spot to wrap.
Yep.